All right, everybody, it's KB5MIQ, big boy. I'm doing a little intro video to the one you're fixing to watch about power supplies because I forgot one of the main things I meant to put on there. The difference between a switching power supply and a transformer or linear type power supply. So this kind of explains it better than I can, so I'm going to read this. Switch mode power supplies differ from linear power supplies in how the primary AC voltage is converted into output DC voltage. Switch mode power supplies use a power transistor to produce a high frequency voltage that is passed through a small transformer, then filtered to remove both the AC component and noise. Linear power supplies deliver DC by passing the primary AC voltage through a transformer, then filtering it to remove the AC component. Switching power supplies feature higher efficiencies, lighter weight, longer hold-up times, and the ability to handle wider input voltage ranges. Linear power supplies are usually less expensive but limited in capability and tend to be larger in physical size. Although switch mode power supplies generate high frequency noise resulting from the use of a power transistor, Micron DI energy units employ excellent filtering circuits that reduce the condition to acceptable levels. So that's kind of the engineering version of the two. Personally, I still like my transformer type power supply, but the switching power supplies are getting to be less expensive, and a lot of people swear by them. I know HKV and DLX both have one. Anyway, this is going to be put on the front of the video coming up so you can see me restart it again. I apologize. I'm still not real good with this video stuff. I'm doing the best I can. I appreciate everybody watching, so continue watching for the main part of this power supply video. Thanks a bunch, everybody. KB5MIQ, big boy. Good morning, everybody. It's Big Boy, KB5MIQ, big boy. Okay, ham radio cat's not cooperating this morning. I don't know what's with her today. It's snowed in down here in northeast Texas today, so thought we'd do a little talking, making a little video. Like I said before, HKV and DLX and myself, we have our nightly roundtable on 28450, and they give me ideas for these videos because we all three of us try to promote the hobby and support it any way we can. And we get a lot of our ideas off social media. And HKV and DLX brought this up about power supplies, batteries. I know DLX is using a battery a lot with his supply, with his station, because he takes his radios camping a lot. And HKV starting to experiment with some battery backup power for a station. I hadn't done it yet. I need to. But we'll talk a little bit about different types of power supplies and options you have and battery options. I know battery technology has improved greatly in the last 30 years. I'll give you a good example of that. In 1991, 92 time frame, there was another ham who's Silent Key now, N5QOI. He was on 10 meters of getting in talking with us at night on our nightly roundtable, and he was running an old Radio Shack, or wasn't new at the time, 10-meter mobile, 25 watt radio, running on 10 meters, PEP on sideband, and trying to run it on a marine battery. And we got to noticing that he'd go to talking and he'd go to dropping out. I think it was Jeff suggested to him, turn your charger on. Well, he turned his charger on and stopped it. His battery, and he was using a full-size marine lead acid battery out of a boat. And it wasn't holding up that long on a 25 watt radio. Now, DLX has been using a 8 amp hour deer feeder battery. Of course, he turns his power down on his radio. He was running 40 watts on it the other night. And running off that, both of us worked Florida station. And the radio didn't have a charger hooked to it, and the battery held up and was keeping the transmit power. That's just 8 amp hour deer feeder battery, lead acid deer feeder battery, excuse my language. I know WD5HKV tried it, went to Tractor Supply and bought a $30 gate opener battery. And we talked a good solid hour last night. Of course, he had his power turned down to 40 watts. Worked great. He had a voltmeter hooked to the battery, and his voltage never went below 12.3 volts during the whole QSO. So battery power is an option. A lot of guys trying to get into this hobby, especially guys on a budget, are concerned about power supplies, what you can do, can't do. There's a reason all our radios are set for 13.8 volts. It's for emergency use when power's out. Luckily, right now, I've said some earlier videos, I've actually done that before, emergencies during power outages. So far, I hadn't had to. But how are you going to power your shack from day-to-day usage? Depends on your budget and how you want to run it. There's a bunch of options out there, but you need to bear in mind this. Let me get my glasses on my notes here. My first radio was an ICOM 701 100-watt radio, and pretty much the standard on those types of radios back then, before the computers multifunction screens got put in them, things like that, was a 16 amp on transmit at 100 watts load at 13.8 volts. My 897D, I'm on current consumption on transmit at nominal 13.8 volts DC on transmit is 22 amps. And I believe most of these newer radios are running like that. Receives 1 amp, so not much there on receive. But what I'm getting at is this. The older radios, you can't, a lot of guys, and I did it myself. Well, my 701 had a matching power supply. The reason I bought a separate power supply, because that matching power supply had a specific cable to that radio, and I didn't want to cut into it. I bought an Astron 20A, which is a 20 amp supply to power my VHF stuff. I know HKV used a Astron RS20A 20 amp supply on his old Kenwood 180, which was a 16 amp radio. The main thing is you're going to have to get a little bigger supply than what your radio calls for. Now, going back to my Army days in running generators, we had a rule of 80%. Whatever your load was, you only loaded a generator to 80% of its rated load. So if you had a 5,000 watt load, you didn't put it on a 5,000 watt generator. You got a generator 20% bigger than your max load. So same way with radios. You don't want to limit yourself to a power supply unless you're just running one radio. That specific 16 amp supply for 16 amp radio. Even though technically it should work forever, you could run a problem down the road. Plus, you're not giving yourself any room for expansion. Now, batteries are a good option. If you're already set up, you don't want to spend a lot of money, like the deer feeder battery option and the gate opener battery option will work real good. Now, depending on what band you want to work on, like if you get on 20 meter band, you may have to turn your power down to QRP power to make some contact so people will listen to you. If you're only running 40 or 50 watts on some crowded bands, you may have a harder time making contact. But when you set your shack up, allow for that. Power supply, you got to have a way to run the radio. So if you're going to use a battery, you're going to have a way to charge it or buy a power supply. Well, let's talk about power supplies. I'm going to try to turn my camera just a little bit where y'all can kind of see my setup. Then we're going to talk a little bit about some power supplies. I'm using a Astron RS35A 35 amp power supply with a 10 mile power distribution panel on it. The reason I did the power distribution panel was like just kind of neaten up my setup a little bit, because what I had before, I had every wire, I was powering my 897 a Kenwood 261A. One time I had a 10-meter mobile on there. Plus, I had a meter, an external meter for my 897. So I had it all lugged together. Come up here, cat. I had it all lugged together going on the power lugs. Made a big wad. If you had to take one out, it's kind of a pain in the butt to do it. So that's the reason I went with a power strip to kind of neaten up my area a little bit. But you've got several different options. That RS-35A Astron is a transformer type, heavy power supply. Personally, I like them. I've never used a switching power supply. At the time I bought that one, the advice I got on switching power supplies that were just now kind of coming into being wasn't real great. Hey, ham radio cat, come on up here. Anyway, wasn't real great. And I was kind of advised to stick with a transformer type power supply. Now, here's something to think about in power supply. All kinds of brands. You've got Astrons, MFJs, Pyramid, anything under the sun in them. You've got transformer type, you got switching power supplies, things like that. So, hey, cat. Aaron, there's my ham radio cat. That's my #1 fan. He likes to see old ham radio cat show up here in these videos. But it depends on your budget and what you want to do with them. Now, like me, I just run my radios. All that power supply's got its on-off switch. There's no meter on it. It's fixed voltage power supply. It works absolutely great. Astrons have been around forever, and they're great power supplies. But it's heavy. See if I can find a price on that thing now, if they've even got the, I don't even know if they even list that one anymore. I'm on DX Engineering, by the way. I won't show that one. Let me go back. First power supply I bought after my old Astron, I bought a used one back in the early 90s. It went down on me. Here we go, Astron power supplies. Depending on what you want, I think this is yep, this is the one I've got. And it's gone up considerably since I bought it. An Astron RS-35A. This one's got front panel power pole connectors. That must be an option blanket. I've had this one about 7, 8, 10 years. I thought I'd give like $149 for it years ago. Now this one's showing at $236. So again, you may not want to spend that much on it, but you got to have something big enough, because like this RS-20 is not going to be big enough to run one of these newer HF radios. I'm getting kind of rambling here, but we go back to something, and I'm not knocking MFJ stuff at all, but I bought an MFJ 50 amp power supply before I bought this one, and it had variable voltage control, had meters on it, cigarette lighter adapter on the front. Hey, cat, all kinds of front panel connections. Really cool supply, especially if you was going to do some experimenting and needed to vary your voltage. Well, the problem with that particular supply was the dang cooling fan on it was horrendously loud. And it was annoying when you keyed up the radio, that fan immediately come on. And I had even considered moving my power supply to the outside of my shack under a shed and running a switch inside to turn it on and off. And I decided, nah, I'm not going to go that much trouble. I just sold it to a friend of mine who needed it for another application. And I bought this Astron. Doesn't have a fan on it, but it works fine. Big heat sinks on it. And I'm not knocking MFJ supply. I didn't like it. Now, DLX has got a Lenco switching power supply. And here is one I'm not that familiar with. Let me see if I can pull this one up, what amperage it is. Let's see. 32 amps at 15 volts peak output. And what have they got on it? $165. Lenco makes pretty good stuff. I've had Alinco radios before. MFJ's got a lot of different power supplies. The MFJ Mighty Light 45 amp switching power supply is $169. I don't know about the fan on it, but I don't know, as far as that goes. That's the issues I had with them. DX Engineering has a whole line of power supplies. MFJ sells power supplies. Main thing, get one big enough for what you're going to do, what you're going to try to do with it, give you some room to grow. Now, do you need a variable power supply? That's up to you. I'm going to give you a good example of why you would use one or not use one. I don't build stuff. I don't do a lot of experimenting. My fixed power supply works fine. I wouldn't fix voltage. Makes it real simple to operate. But I did have a job at one time to where I was repairing electrical items. And a lot of the items I had to repair had to have various voltages applied to them. So I secured a variable power supply to do my testing stuff with. So if you're into testing stuff, building stuff, a variable supply may be the way to go for you. So, and again, you're getting a little more expense. Let's see, what else am I going to try to cover on this? Oh yeah, batteries. Those two batteries I mentioned earlier, you can get them at Tractor Supply. They're relatively inexpensive. May not be able to pronounce this right. Bioeno battery has become a real popular battery in ham radio. I think they're fairly expensive. I don't know where you can even buy those at. I hadn't looked them up yet. But main thing, if you go get in this hobby, you got to have a power supply or a battery. And like one of HKV's buddies told him years ago, they went to Hamcom and all my buddy bought was a power supply. Said, man, you can't have no fun with that. Well, may not, but you got to have one. Anyway, hope this information helped. I know I'm kind of rambling a little bit this morning. Been snowed in for 3 days, other than feeding cows, about to go nuts. Main thing, you got to have a power supply to work out of your house. Whether you use a battery or whether you use a fixed station power supply. You be sure to get one big enough for your radio. Check the amp draw of the radios you're going to use, and I'm using 100 watts as a standard right now, and they're using about 22 amps. I believe I looked up my old Kenwood the other day, and it's a 50 watt. I think it's about 11. So that would be about right. So that's half wattage, so that'd be about the right on amps. Buy a bigger supply, buy the biggest one you can afford, so you got room to expand on it later. All right, so anyway, hope this information helps the people out. KB5MIQ is my call sign, and I'm on QRZ page with my email posted. Send me an email. If I can help anybody any way I can, I'll be glad to answer your email. Put your call sign in the subject matter so I don't miss it. I've had a couple people email me, and I enjoy chatting with them and trying to help them out with this hobby. Mondays, Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Friday nights, about 7:30 Central Standard Time, HKV, DLX, and myself meet on 10 meters on 28,450, unless somebody's there, and if somebody's there, we'll be either 5 or 6 kilohertz up or down from that. Please check in with us. We enjoy having people check in with us. It was something HKV and I got to doing back in the 90s when the 10-meter boom was really going, and it's really fun to have people from all over the country and even some other countries on occasion check in with us. Thanks to everybody who subscribed to the channel. Hit 166 subscribers. If you get a chance, check out Ham Radio Flea Market and Trading Post page on Facebook, Ham Radio page on Facebook, Amateur Radio, Elmer's, other pages, a multitude of them. Get some good information off all of them. Just be prepared. Sometimes you may not get the answer you're looking for, but that's what we're in the hobby for. We're going to try to help you any way we can. All right, everybody, have a great week. It's KB5MIQ Big Boy 73.